Welcome to the Countywide CSE Collaborative Facilitator Request for Qualifications Bidders Conference. My name is Ali Jerkovich, and I'm the program manager for this project. Today we're going to be spending probably about 20 to 30 minutes just kind of going through what the Request for Qualifications actually outlines, a little bit about the CSE Collaborative, and then we will have a chance for folks to answer questions. Because everyone is participating remotely, I'd love if folks would be able to mute themselves during the bidders conference, and then we will have an opportunity for questions afterwards. If you are using the Skype option and have access to the chat box, go ahead and put questions there. Would folks like to introduce themselves?
Good morning. This is Catherine Valenti.
Morning, Catherine.
Good morning.
Hi, this is Emmy. Can you hear me?
Yep. Good morning, Emmy. Thank you. So this is also being recorded and will be available up on our website. First, before we get started, we would like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people, and the coastal Salish people, past and present, and honor with gratitude the land itself and the Duwamish tribe. We think it's important that we acknowledge the land on which we gather is the traditional and unceded territory of First Nation folks. For more information on how to support the Duwamish people, you can visit realrentduwamish.org. That is an option available. So we did this part. Thank you all for being here. Again, I'm Ali Jerkovich, the program manager with the Veteran Senior Human Services Levy. And here to talk today about the Countywide CSE Collaborative Facilitator RFQ. So what we're going to cover today is we'll talk just briefly about what the Veteran Seniors and Human Services Levy is, an overview of the original strategy in the VSHSL that's on the Countywide Commercial Sexual Exploitation Collaborative. That was an RFP that was released in the summer and is now in the process of contracting with 4 awarded agencies. And this facilitator would be helping support that strategy and those entities. So we will review what that looks like for those who might not be familiar. We will go over the request for qualifications for this investment, talk about how to apply, and then we will answer any questions folks might have. So what is the Veteran Senior Human Services Levy? The Veteran Senior Human Services Levy is an expansion on former levies. It was passed by King County voters in 2017, and it promotes healthy living, financial stability, social engagement, housing stability, and service system access and improvement for veterans, seniors, and vulnerable populations, which is my team, which is what this bucket of funding for the SS3 Strategy comes from. We are in the first year of the levy was a transition planning year, and so guided by the Veteran Senior Human Services Levy Transition Plan that mainly continued services and programs for the former VHSL. The plan guides investments for the remainder of the levy from the years 2019 through 2023. And as you can see, our veterans are included as service members and their families. Seniors are 55 and older and their caregivers. And then the vulnerable populations is the human services, which encompasses quite a wide array of priority populations. The guiding principles of the levy is to build and improve connections. So connections among the people the levy serves and among the people and organizations that provide the levy's services. We think that people do best when they feel a sense of belonging based in personal relationships and connections to the community. So what you'll see is this combined arms approach, a community of service to connect providers and connecting clients to foster belonging. And one of the big things that our team holds and sees as sort of the North Star of our work is what can only the Veteran Senior Human Services Levy do? Because this is new funding to the community, it is not supplanting existing funding. We have a unique opportunity to support communities to do innovative projects and use this funding in a way that really supports and lifts up voices we might not have traditionally heard from, which is one of the things we're most excited about with this countywide collaborative. In addition to that, our overarching goal is to ensure that all people, regardless of who they are and where they live, have the opportunity to thrive with full and equal access to opportunities, power, and resources. So equity and social justice is the key to the work of the levy, and it's embedded throughout the principles, both of the collaborative's RFP and in the way that we are looking for a facilitator to support that work that is deeply rooted in equity and social justice. So we have sought in the Levy to support organizations that are reflective of and embedded in the communities they serve in order to recognize and address the disparities and disproportionality that exists in our current communities. So this shows up through this shows up in a bunch of different ways. One of the ways we're trying to do that for this is to have interviews with selected applicants in coordination with the countywide collaborative entities who helped design the request for qualifications to think about what they really needed to have a facilitator who can help support their primary equity and social justice goals and vision for this work. So we are going to talk a little bit now about the SS3 Strategy, which is for the Countywide Commercial Sexual Exploitation Case Management Collaborative, as it was originally outlined in the implementation plan, just to give you a bit of a frame for the work that the facilitator will be helping support moving forward. So this strategy fell under the Service System Access and Improvement in order to provide specialized case management and advocacy. The programs under this strategy contribute to the community level effort to promote accessible, efficient, and effective human service systems, regardless of person's location or circumstances in King County. And so what we really tried to look at here is not only a diversity in service models and population, but also a geographic diversity, and sort of really see in that model of what can only VSHSL do to try and address those gaps, areas where we know there might not be supported services already. So just to sort of ground us in the work as well, I'm going to offer the definitions that we used under the strategy so everyone comes in with shared language and the expectation as the facilitator. And a collaborative, two or more parties working together toward a common goal. Pretty self-explanatory. In this case, it is 4 different awarded entities, which we will review as well. We use the language of the sex trade, an inclusive term used by the community to self-identify. The term can describe, but is not limited to describing, individuals who may self-identify as having engaged in, or may be identified by others as having engaged in activities such as, but not limited to, sex work, prostitution, trafficking, commercial sexual exploitation, and sex exchange. So what we're doing here is a response from the community to really address the wider range of both identities and lived experiences of persons in the sex trade that we are trying to provide services to. And lived experience in the sex trade is a phrase to reflect the self-determination of anyone who identifies with the definition of the sex trade, either as a victim, a survivor, or other. The Countywide Collaborative RFP, so that strategy again was to promote increased geographic, cultural, and racial diversity, increase community understanding about the unique needs and diversity of experiences of adults with lived experience in the sex trade. So we're also primarily targeting folks who are over the age of not only 18, but really looking at that resource cliff of folks who are over the age of 24, which is what the implementation plan guides us to do, is to prioritize adults. And that was a response to from what we heard from the community around a dearth of services for folks who are older. And the efforts outlined in the implementation plan target key areas of need experienced by adults in the sex trade, including substance use treatment, housing stability, assessment for and provision of employment services, mental health treatment, and other priorities as identified by the collaborative. And so while that's what's directed in the implementation plan, we know that the collaborative's goals will be much broader and will focus on other priorities as defined by the collaborative and as it sort of is developed in relationship with collaborative partners. And just to reiterate for folks who might be on the phone, who might not have the Skype option and are able to see the PowerPoint, it will again be loaded onto our funding page, and I will provide a link for that. So the 4 awarded entities are API Chaya, which is providing API worker outreach, organizing, and services to end sex trafficking by providing multilingual outreach to API persons in the sex trade. I am not doing a full description of what each of these incredible agencies is providing, but giving a high-level overview. For more information about each of the agencies, you can reach out or you can look on their websites. This is really just an intent to sort of give a quick touch to what each of these entities is doing. Ilenes is an accessible and safe community space that provides a hub of services in the Pacific Highway corridor through peer leadership, outreach, and intensive case management. United Territories of Pacific Islanders Alliance, or Utopia, through the Sex Workers Empowerment Initiative, will be to support transgender and gender diverse people in the sex trades using an Indigenous healing framework, among other things, including case management. And then the YWCA of Seattle, King, and Snohomish, who will be providing supportive services to survivors of CSE with a focus on the unique needs and experiences of Black and African American communities in South King County. So an overview, and this again, I really recommend folks to have a full and thorough look of the request for qualifications for the facilitator. A lot of this content is embedded in there to help orient folks to the work they will be doing. But just a light touch of the goals and guiding principles as outlined in the original plan for the collaborative, which will continue to be the goals and guiding principles of the collaborative, although that shared mission and vision development will be done in coordination with the awarded entities. But the goals to promote a network of programs that respect the self-determination, agency, and dignity of people with lived experience in the sex trades, to enhance capacity building for partners that are providing culturally specific services, to address gaps in services, both cultural as well as geographic, to serve the needs of communities across King County. And then the guiding principles for this work are to respect, prioritize, and uplift people with lived experience in the sex trade as leaders and experts, and to promote unity and trust through a collaborative built on a set of common values that are politically and socially neutral. Commit to equity and social justice by promoting the needs of communities most marginalized by their identities within and outside of their lived experience in the sex trade. So the scope of work for the collaborative itself, and we will then move on to what the facilitator scope of work will be, but really their work will be helping guide the collaborative scope of work, and so again, providing that context. To develop a countywide outreach and engagement strategy to serve adults with lived experience in the sex trade. Develop a countywide strategy to support immediate and long-term health needs of the community. Develop a countywide strategy to promote accessible services and other priorities as identified by the collaborative. And again, our focus population is adults with lived experience in the sex trade, particularly those over the age of 24. And the priority populations that were outlined in the original request for proposal and stand today are communities of color, Native and Indigenous peoples, and the LGBTQ plus community. So the milestones and deliverables of the collaborative, again, to provide context, is sort of a co-development of the collaborative's operating principles that'll include, but are not limited to, create a mission and vision statement, create a set of clear goals, develop and deploy a strategy for service model delivery, which will be throughout the life of the collaborative's investment. And so while this request for qualifications is outlined for 1 year, the collaborative itself is intended to run through the year 2023. And so their work will continue while we're in the kind of planning phase for what that might look like. And then develop additional milestones for the first year and for anticipated rollout of services after design completion. So now we're moving on to the facilitator request for qualifications. And again, we really recommend that folks read the entire request for qualifications document that's available on our funding page, because I'm not going to be outlining every single piece of it, and there are some other important details in there, including application process, what needs to be submitted, the both larger and broader scope of work, as well as more details about deliverables and timelines. But just to look broadly at the scope of work, the facilitator will be responsible for planning, implementing, and supporting ongoing assessment efforts associated with the collaborative, including but not limited to supporting the collaborative to develop a service model and a work plan for the outlined scope of work, general oversight for collaborative activities and associated projects, technical assistance to local regional coalitions and partnerships, and then really a big thing is that you will be contracted through our office, and so working in very close partnership with the King County Veteran Senior Human Services Levy staff to sort of be accountable to both the implementation plan strategy as well as to the 4 entities to make sure that we are supporting their needs. And then next we'll talk about the deliverables. And one thing I do want to cue for folks is that while the RFQ itself has details, we understand that a lot of the priorities will be developed with the collaborative. And so we are asking folks to be flexible and understanding that this is sort of a work in progress. And so a lot of the work will be done with the collaborative itself. And so this is our best estimate and outline of what we at minimum expect from the facilitator and the work that they will be doing with the collaborative, understanding that that shared goals and vision is really going to help drive the ongoing work. So the main key deliverables: coordinate and facilitate membership meetings, support the collaborative to develop a shared mission and vision statement, meet with each countywide CSE collaborative agency to understand their organization and learn about their expertise, develop a work plan, document findings and progress of programs and activities, and that again will be in partnership with the King County staff, and identify next steps for the collaborative's goals beyond the 2019 to 2020 contract for the facilitator itself. So the total funding for this program is up to $65,000 for the program period of December 1st to December 31st. One of the things that we also want to outline is that this is funding through the technical assistance and capacity building portion of the Veteran Senior Human Services Levy, which is where this pot of funding is coming from, and was a choice we made to pull funding aside so that the collaboratives can use the full scope of their strategy funding, and we could support them in this way through that technical assistance and capacity building. So the eligibility for the facilitator. This request seeks eligible facilitators and providers serving communities in King County, Washington. Small nonprofits, organizations are encouraged to submit proposals, as are organizations, entities, and persons that are owned, operated, or led by individuals from a historically marginalized community. And there are additional minimum qualifications outlined in the request for qualifications in the RFQ that we would like you to make sure and identify what those are. A couple of those things would be 3 years experience working with social service programs in a coalition, collaborative, or community process of some kind, or relevant experience. Knowledge of best practices in collaborative processes, demonstrated background experience in the principles of equity and social justice. And that's a big priority from the collaborative members themselves, and to have a strong background in partnering with community-based agencies and entities like theirs, the 4 awarded entities, supporting culturally specific services or programming. So we again really want to center the equity and social justice work, both of the county and of the collaborative. The application itself, we're asking to submit a clear, concise application that is no more than 5 pages. That is excluding samples if you'd like to provide samples that are in addition to or longer than those 5 pages. Using 12-point font and single-spaced with 1-inch margins, you do not need to use the full 5 pages. We're trying to allow for folks to both be flexible in how much they want to share, as well as recognize that we can also, we really benefit from clear, concise applications. And the other thing is that interviews will be held with selected applicants the week of November 18th. And you will be getting, if you are one of the selected applicants for those time slots, will be given an opportunity for different slots during the week of November 18th, and those folks will be notified. So a big piece of this is that we want to make sure that the collaborative members themselves have a real true chance to come in and meet folks, and that you in turn as an applicant would have a chance to meet collaborative members and learn more about their programming and offer a chance, to get to know folks in person and have a real authentic conversation. So the complete proposals, the complete application submittals will include a resume of the facilitator, and or if you are applying as an organization, the primary facilitator, the person you intend from your organization to lead this scope of work. summary of subject matter expertise and experience working with social service programs. And again, that would be of the primary facilitator. If you are applying as an organization, that the organization's subject matter expertise is relevant. However, we really want to make sure that the person leading this work is the one who holds that body of expertise and information, while they may also be supported by an organization that has done this work. But again, to use this really as the frame of who will be leading this facilitation process. A summary of prior facilitation projects, summary of experience developing work plans, and then one or more samples of related work, and a list of 3 references with their contact information. The applications are due by 5:00 p.m. on Wednesday, November 13th, and complete proposals will be emailed directly to me, a.jerkovich@kingcounty.gov, and you can find my contact information and these details as well on the request for qualifications document. That is also the email address where you would be submitting questions. If you have questions in the interim around the RFQ itself or any of the processes, and I'll talk a little bit about that again when we look to the timeline here in a moment. As far as the review criteria and scoring, you will also find this information in the RFQ itself. 3 of the sections are around facilitation experience specifically, so subject matter expertise, human service sector experience, work plan development experience, and then the samples will also be weighted, as well as references and interviews with selected candidates. And the review panel will consist of King County employees as well as representatives from each of the Countywide CSE collaborative programs. So to look at the timeline, the release date was on October 16th. The bidders conference is today, October 28th. The final day to submit questions is November 8th. So really briefly, I'm going to talk a bit about our open procurement policy. What that means is then whenever we have a procurement that is currently open, like this request for qualification or any other procurement within the Veteran Senior Human Services Levy, is we have essentially a blackout period for our staff. So if you have a question, you can email it directly to me. You will get an email back that says we're unable to answer questions individually, but that your question will be added to an FAQ document that will be loaded up onto our funding page. And for information about where to find that, you can go to our VSHSL funding page, and under the open funding procurements, there will be a table that includes this RFQ with additional documents, and you will find the FAQ document there. So if you have a question, I will also direct you in the email to that document. If you are curious about what other folks might be asking, please be sure to check that regularly. We will be updating it regularly. So the last day to submit final questions is November 8th, a week before the close of the RFQ. And if you have any questions about that process itself, feel free to reach out and I can provide you some context. The applications themselves are due November 13th by 5 p.m. That is a Wednesday. The responses will be reviewed and rated during that time in November. The interview with selected applicants will be the following week. The notifications of award decisions will likely be in December. And the anticipated contract start date is also likely December, and this is subject to change based on the timeline process. Okay, so that is all of the information from me. Again, I want to stress to have folks thoroughly read the request for qualifications in order to make sure that you have all of the information that you need to be successful. And now if folks on the phone have questions or are on Skype, you are welcome to either ask them or type them in. And so if folks do have questions, I want to allow some time now for that.
Hi, this is Catherine. Just a quick question. You're not asking for budget or cost information. You've got the $65,000 cap. Is there, can you just say about how you're thinking about any sort of limitations on that or expectations on pricing?
Sure. So we are not asking for a budget on this because we want to make this as low barrier as possible and understand that a lot of that work will be co-developed with the individual who is awarded. If you have an idea about scoping or want to present a work plan or something of that nature, you are welcome to do so in your application, but that will be a conversation that we have with the awarded entity. As far as any sort of limitations or expectations, not that I have in mind at the current moment, but I will take that question back to our team and make sure to give a more thorough response that will be posted on the FAQ document on the website.
Great, thank you. And can I have a second question?
Of course.
In the section where you're asking about subject matter expertise and experience working with social service programs and coalition, is that subject matter expertise in coalition work kind of generally, like in human services, or is it specifically subject matter expertise in working with coalitions working with individuals in the sex trades?
That is a great question. Thank you, Catherine, for that clarification. So we are talking about subject matter expertise within the context of collaborative building and coalition work within the human services sector at large. We recognize that this is a unique field. A lot of the folks who have the subject matter expertise are programs that are currently operating in this framework. And so we're not requiring someone to have subject matter expertise about persons with lived experience in the sex trade. Although if that is something that an individual applying has, of course, we would like to hear about it. But our primary interest is in subject matter expertise around the facilitation of groups of this kind or relevant work within the human services sector. So we want to make sure that we have someone who really understands the dynamic of human services programs, not necessarily specific to gender-based violence or persons with lived experience in the sex trade. Although again, if that is relevant experience, we would love to hear about it.
Got it, thank you.
Okay. And so that should be it for this morning. Thank you so much for your time. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. My email is ajerkovich@kingcounty.gov. That can also be found on the request for qualifications. And if we don't have any more questions, we're going to go ahead and end for the day.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.